Okay, I promise I'll be as succinct as possible, yet comprehensive. So let's jump right in. Erik Erikson is a stage theorist. He's also a psychoanalyst. He works under the tutelage of Sigmund Freud. Remember, psychoanalysts believe that early experiences in life are going to shape or going to at least impact in a significant manner our development or personality, the set of stable traits that we will have throughout our lifespan that change very little. His theory, Erik Erikson insisted that Freud placed too much emphasis on sex, and he found this he didn't agree with this view, and something that Freud didn't take very well, as we discussed in class in terms of his difficult personality, and but he went along and created his own. So we have the difference between his theory and Freud's is that Freud's was psychosexual, Erikson is psychosocial. Erikson extended Freud's five-stage psychosexual theory of development into 8 stages. Again, Erikson felt that Freud placed too much emphasis on sex, and Erikson believed, another difference is that Erikson believed that it was more the social relationships, not necessarily sexual, that that would sort of shape our development and play a huge role. And so that these social relationships were at the core of development. Now, similar to Freud, there will be a problem at each stage. Now, pay attention to this, and please have them in your notes. Freud would call them conflict. Erikson labeled these problems at each stage as psychosocial crisis or crises. And but the idea behind them was the same. You had a challenge that you had to work on. Erikson was more explicit in terms of saying that the way we dealt with this social crisis was going to lead to either a positive or a negative outcome. Yes, similar to Freud, but he was more explicit, and you'll see what I mean by when I say this, in terms of being explicit as to ending each stage or with a positive or a negative outcome. Something else that Erikson added to his theory is that each, and I'm pretty sure Myers doesn't include this part, but I have seen it on tests before, is that in addition to ending each stage in a positive or negative manner, there's also this thing he called virtue. Think about it as a prize. And sort of you solve each stage in a positive way, and then you would earn this virtue. And it's important to know as well that virtues would help us deal with other developmental challenges in the future. When I was reviewing this, it reminds me of these video games, and when you finish one world in a game, and you throughout this game you sort of acquire these superpowers. Well, think about virtues in that sense that will allow you, like the shield or the ability to run faster. I don't know. I haven't played video games in a long time, but you get what I try to say with this. Okay, so let's begin with the theories. Let's begin with the stages. The first stage is called basic trust versus basic mistrust. Again, this versus state label for each stage is what I meant by very explicit. In the title of each stage, there is the positive and the negative outcome. So in this stage, it's the ages that correspond to this stage are from birth to year number 1, to our first birthday. And the positive outcome is what we strive for, what we want the infant to end with. And if it's positive, the resolution of this challenge in this stage, then the infant ends with basic trust. I'll explain that in a little bit. And the negative outcome of this stage is when the infant ends with basic mistrust. So remember, 0 to 1, this is a time when we are the most dependent on others. And this itself is the crisis. how we as infant are going to deal with this crisis is going to depend on how others are going to help us deal with this. And I think it helps to add this question. Some textbook add to it is the question for this stage is, can I trust those around me? Gives you an idea of what is the crisis that he's going or she is going to deal with, this infant. And so think about it. An infant is an utterly helpless creature, basically, right? It cannot survive out of the womb without any help at all. So babies need a lot of food, need a lot of nourishment, I don't know, diaper change, they need love. We saw that with Mary Ainsworth, attachment theory. And we saw the physiological importance of love, that it's not just basically something complementary. And, the contact comfort, Harry Harlow, the holding, the bonding. And remember, if a baby doesn't receive this, then he or she runs at risk of having this failure to thrive. Remember, sort of even having all the biological needs met, and yet because of lack of interaction with an adult, positive interaction, and because this baby is not receiving the love and comfort that and touch that this baby needs, then that baby is perhaps going to, perhaps even at risk of could even die. Death could be because of the lack of love. So it's essential. So I've stated the point that babies are incredibly dependent. And here is your helpless baby who is completely dependent on those around him or her and for every single need. And, it's a truly life or death situation. So if the baby gets this sensitive and timely care, hopefully this rings a bell, from attachment theory and attachment research, then the baby is going to develop what Erikson called basic trust. And what is basic trust? It's basically, as its title says, I can trust the world to meet those needs I need at this time to survive. And if the infant has a reliable parental figure, then they will end the stage with the virtue that Erikson called hope. Hope in others, hope in the world. That it's basically a hope that says, I can trust those around me. There are good people in this world. And so if on the contrary, the baby's needs are not met, and instead neglected due to any reasons that we discussed in attachment theory, then the baby ends this stage with a sense of mistrust, basic mistrust. And it's, I cannot trust anyone. This is the mantra in this that this baby keeps on repeating. This neglect or this lack of interaction is internalized so much that the baby grows up with the model saying, well, I'm not worthy for interaction, and nobody takes care of me, so I'm worth nothing. And carrying this message during your teenage years or during your adulthood years could make it very difficult to connect with anybody, with your friends, with your romantic partners, with anything that is a quasi-romantic partner, teachers, potential, love relationships. It's going to be incredibly difficult. So because truly, at the core, people that are afraid to connect with others, people that are unable to connect, that seem not interested, Erikson would argue, and other psychoanalysts would argue that it's basically the fear of others, first of all, seeing me unworthy, so I won't give them the chance towards that. And it's also a fear of my own inability to connect with others and meaningful relationships. So, it's like someone who does not trust the other. The adults around him or her will rarely open up. And instead, and I've seen teenagers many times at school acting this way. It's sort of usually when a teenager mistrusts, doesn't have trust in its environment, will cope with this by acting not very interested. It's sort of, they don't care, but it's really not that they don't care. They don't want to open themselves up for another disappointment, for feeling very vulnerable, that they can't trust anybody. And as adults, this happens also the same things, friendships, romantic relationships. Bottom line here is that after this stage, you develop a sense whether you are worthy. The infant develops this sense of, am I worthy or not? Can I trust the world or not? Depending on what his or her experience is, and it depends all on receiving that sensitive, timely care that a parental figure, main caregiver, can provide. The second stage, we have autonomy versus shame and doubt. This occurs during the ages of 2 to 3, 4. Of course, as its title says, the positive outcome is autonomy, independence, and the negative outcome is shame or doubt. So let's explain this. During this time in life, and a parent of any toddler can attest to this, because this happens across the board, children developed a variety of skills, whether it be walking, talking, pushing, pulling, climbing, and remember, don't forget potty training, that Erikson also recognizes as also a significant challenge during this stage. And that is an ability. I can use actually the toilet on my own. And so this is a stage in which the child, because of these skills that they are realizing they have, is they're making some choices. And the problem is that the choices are not always, don't always agree with the choices of the parents. This is the time, and you've heard it, I'm sure, the terrible twos. I find them that they're actually terrible twos, terrible threes, and four, things get a little better then, or easier, I must say. But the favorite word, the word that toddlers and little children at this age hear the most are no, and their favorite word is mine. And they also like to say no too. And they're very stubborn at this age, and this stems from, according to Erikson, and I can tell you from a pragmatic point of view that this is the case, that they want to prove themselves and others that they can do things on their own. And this is where the autonomy, they are testing their own autonomy to prove to themselves and the world that they can do things on their own. For them, this is incredible. They want to put their shoes on. They want to put their clothes on. I'm sure you were, not so long ago, right? 15, 13 years ago, you were the same way, and you went through this phase. Ask your parents, and you'll see that that this is the case. So I said that their choices in this proving that they can do things on their own in an autonomous manner is not always going to agree with the parents. They're going to clash a lot. This is a stage in development in which children are most similar to teenagers. Like you guys and these guys are very similar in that sense, that there's always this test that they're trying to pass in terms of to achieve and test their own independence. So it's important, this is an important note. So during this stage, because of these dynamics, it's important for the parent to first steer their child's behavior towards a socially acceptable direction, what is normally allowed or not. But the parent also, in steering this behavior towards a socially acceptable direction, the parent also needs to sometimes not make sure that they're not blocking the child's sense of autonomy. Because if the parent is too controlling, if the parent is consistently saying no, 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 then according to Erikson, according to the psychosocial theory, remember, interactions are what are the main thing here that we're talking about, that's going to shape personality and development. If the parent is saying no, no, no all the time, then this interaction can lead the child to feeling uncertain of these abilities. And it's not a great feeling, because this feeling of uncertainty of yourself is going to be associated with shame. I should be ashamed of myself. I can't do anything. And that is case of embarrassment. Feeling that what you do is wrong And how do they know it's wrong? Because the parent is scolding them, telling them no, no, no to everything. Then again, they're going to internalize that every decision they make is wrong. And what happens when you learn this? Well, you feel like this dark cloud approaching everything, and that anything you do is going to disappoint your parents. And the child ends up with feelings of shame and doubt of themselves. So what the parent wants to do here is to get the child to gain a sense of control and regulation without losing their self-efficacy and self-esteem. Remember those important terms. The parent doesn't want child to internalize this and think self-efficacy and self-esteem go hand in hand together. Is self-efficacy, remember the article of stereotype threat, is the extent to which I think I can be good at a particular thing, or I can do, plain and simple. And the parent doesn't want, by being too over-controlling, to instill this in their own child. And this is the challenge. This interaction is the challenge. It sounds easier said than done, to sort of balance this steering their behavior and at the same time not blocking their sense of autonomy. So on the positive note, Erikson adds that, or explains that, if the child experiences more autonomy than shame and doubt, and I'm phrasing it this way because we can't have this idea that these stages are perfect. Anybody who has parents know that even the best relationships between parents and children, there are moments, there are ups and downs, right? So if the child experiences more autonomy, more experiences in which their autonomy is reaffirmed or supported than shame or doubt, in which the opposite occurs and they're told no, then we will develop, or the child will develop, the virtue of will. And what is will? Well, it's the ability to balance this free choice with the ability to control yourself, your self-restraint. Again, it's a balance between free choice, I can do things, and self-restraint, telling yourself, well, but I should not do this. And that's basically the virtue you graduate with from this stage. So again, suggestions for parents is, and I know easier said than done, I live this every day, but the ideal here is to instill and encourage your child at this age to, if you want to encourage autonomy, is to set up the stage for the child to create things, but also allowing them, setting the stage also for that, so that they can make things on their own. For example, what I'm trying to say is that get the child, like I did, get Velcro shoes, as many as you can, so that they can put on their shoes on their own. If with tying the knot can be quite difficult at a very early age. So that's just setting the stage so that they can get a grip on that sense of autonomy, and sometimes you got to let them make a mess and let them eat despite making a mess. Again, so that they don't internalize this consistent no. Or you can also pepper the child with questions, giving them some autonomy in the decision-making process. This is something that I learned right on with my first child. And it is, for instance, giving them a choice, that itself is going to lead to a reaffirmation of autonomy. Like, do you want to brush your teeth first, or do you want to read a book first? And that could be giving them a choice. They love that, and it automatically diffuses any type of tension most of the time. By giving, another example could be by giving the child several options, or even two, instead of imposing or giving them a choice, because by imposing, you're letting them know that they are not autonomous, that you are calling the shots here all the time. So just making them part of the process is a great way that is recommended based on Erikson's psychosocial theory of development to deal with this stage and encourage them to develop the positive outcome of this autonomy versus shame and doubt stage. Now, third stage, initiative versus guilt. The ages that correspond to this stage are between 4 and 5. These are the preschool years. And this stage is very important. One of the reasons why it's important is because language is refined. Children are starting to conjugate verbs, at least most of the time regular ones, but they're starting to conjugate them, starting to speak in full sentences. And the thing, guys, is that with language, imagination becomes more vivid. They really do go hand in hand, which is extremely important because this is the time when we see the child come up with ideas, new thoughts, fantasies, plans about the future. I will be a fireman. I will be a doctor. You see a lot of this in the stage. So, in that, without language, that imagination is really can come to a halt, or it's very limited. This is also a time when we see the child explore, and this goes again in hand with that imagination for the first time. What I mean explore, like explore future, what they want to become. And children are desperate to show you what they know how to do at this stage. Oh, trust me, it's every single day. My daughter comes in and shows me a drawing she made, or Believer shows me basically a move he learned. And it's funny because you look at the move or whatever it is, oh, Daddy, look what I can do. And it's something very simple, but again, and it's very hard sometimes not to laugh, but it's just so cute too, that I act as if like, wow, how could you do that? Because again, you want to encourage this. Because by encouraging it, then you let them know that you sort of are encouraging or supporting them to be confident. That's the word I was looking for. So when you are confident about something, you'll take initiative. The first step, and what is initiative? The first step to create something. And Erik Erikson stated that if the parent, on the contrary, instead of ridiculing the child, instead of encouraging them to, when they showed you their abilities, when they were so proud of it, if the parent or the main caregivers would ridicule or criticize the child for being imaginative, then they would experience guilt. Now, guilt in this case is defined by Erikson as guilt for trying. Guilt for not being able to do what you wanted to do. Because again, you take the initiative, you put yourself out there and, Dad, look at this, what I know how to do. And if you are punished by being ridiculed, then you start to learn that why do I even try to do this if when I become creative, it is punished. And so if, on the contrary, the parent encourages the child's imagination, as I try to do most of the time, is if you take their thoughts seriously, but in a genuine way, because children are smarter than what you think. They really pick up on the subtleties. So you try to be really genuine about finding the amazement in what they're doing, regardless of how simple their creation might be. And then you are creating this sense of initiative. So the successful outcome, assuming that a child will experience more initiative than guilt, meaning more encouragement from caregivers than humiliation or ridicule, then the virtue of this stage is purpose. And purpose, as we know it, having a goal. And you might have known that when we do not have a goal, when we experience that type of boredom, when we do not have anything to strive for, as stressful as it might be, then everything sort of loses meaning. And there's this sense of being lost and of internalizing this sense of, I'm not going to even try because every time I try, I'm ridiculed. I really am worth. And again, there's this impact that it has on self-esteem and on self-efficacy. And remember too, what happens with self-fulfilling prophecy, if you add that social psychological principle, if your expectation is that others are going to ridicule you, then most likely you will put yourself in that position automatically to confirm that expectation. And again, this cycle begins. So again, this is the initiative versus guilt. Begins in the preschool years, are starting language usage, and you are trying to find a balance of, oh, I didn't know I have it there, balance of free choice and self-control is what you want. Now, the fourth stage is industry versus inferiority. I always have to look up the meaning of industry. I have a hard time understanding it, but I looked it up in the dictionary, and industry, in order to help me remember it. I have difficulty remembering stage theories, believe it or not. But industry is the ability to be effective at something, to be efficient, to finish something. An industrious worker is a worker you can trust on, is a colleague that will finish things and get things completed and achieve goals, right? So this stage is called industry versus inferiority. Corresponds to the ages of 5 to 11, 12, beginning of puberty. Well, you have there the positive and the negative outcome. Now, the question here is, am I the best? Am I better? And this question comes from school. Now, school got serious. Children are beginning to learn important things here, and things that are necessary for survival, for economic survival. What I mean by this is how to be productive in society. And when a child or when a preteen feels, these are sort of the lower middle school years, and how do you gain this? When you gain this sense of productivity, then you also gain a sense of pride, and this comes also with a sense of responsibility. You start to feel with these things that you are learning in school that you are part of a society, that this is not just this world in which your imagination is going to run loose and you do whatever you want, but there are rules, and if you're good at demonstrating that you are good by playing by the rules and learning things and putting those things in practice, then you gain this sense of industry. Wow, I'm good at this, and I'm better than others because, remember, you're in school, and comparison is inevitable. You know who the good students were, and when you were in the 3rd and 4th grade, you know who the students that you couldn't rely on, or that didn't work hard, or that at that age, you thought they weren't very industrious. Let's just leave it at that. So teachers begin to play an important role, and so do peers. Teachers, because think about it, they are the ones who are calling the shots as to who is in the child's mind. They are the ones calling the shots. They are the ones who are confirming whether you are efficient, whether you are industrious or not, whether you can get things done, whether you can accomplish goals. And peers are influential because basically, they serve as a point of comparison, and you also spend a lot of time with them at this age. The sleepovers begin, or we're spending a lot of time in the peers' homes in addition to spending time with them at school. So they are also going to play a huge role in this industry versus inferiority, psychosocial stage. I told you already that children learn important social skills. I said sort of skills like math and social studies, but also social skills. You begin working in teams, and you begin getting a sense whether you are good with working with others, good at working with others. And so hopefully you also build this social competence stage. Remember when we spoke about that too. And this ability to speak with others and to talk with others. Now I remember attachment was correlated to this. So again, the industry sense is the ability to keep at task until completion, and then that helps you develop the sense of industry. Now, when we don't feel industrious, without industry, it leads to a feeling of inferiority. Something is wrong with you. You're seeing all your peers accomplish goals, finish goals, and finish tasks, and the teacher recognizes this in them. But if you're not achieving this, then you're feeling, first of all, you're not contributing to society. Remember, your society is your school. It's sort of your mini country, and if you feel that you're not worth, that your opinion is not considered because you are considered to be lazy or a bad student, then you start losing this sense of industry and instead inferiority, which would be the negative outcome of this psychosocial stage. So just to summarize, someone who's industrious is someone who is considered to be hardworking, and that because of their hard work, they always finish a task, they always accomplish a goal, and then the teacher is ultimately going to play a huge role in deciding when a goal has been accomplished, right? And peers, again, are the comparison point and the ones that are often working together with the child to achieve these goals. If the child feels that he can do so, then he says, "Oh, I like working in teams. Working in teams, we get along together and we get things done." And but again, if the child experiences more failure than industry in this stage, then there is this sense of inadequacy. That's the term. And inadequacy means you are different, but not different as in unique, cool. It's more different that something is wrong. And carrying this sense of something is wrong, I am inadequate, then it's very difficult to accomplish goals. Remember, again, self-fulfilling prophecy has a huge role on this. So if I have the sense of I am inferior, then this also has to do with self-esteem. Self-esteem is big in this stage. I think I mentioned that in the previous one. If I did, well, self-esteem is even more important here. And one last thing. So in order to develop industry, it's not that the child needs to be encouraged, loved, and with the feelings intact all the time. Instead, because that's just not simply the way it works. And trust me, some students have a hard time believing this. I mean, hard work does not always reach a good grade or a good assessment or success in general. So there is the value of experiencing failure. Believe it or not, there is a value of certainly, like, it's not that you're going to arbitrarily humiliate somebody, but experiencing that also gives you strength too. You don't want to think that you are good at everything. That's also setting yourself up or setting your child up for disaster and for failure. So the importance here is to have a healthy balance and experiencing more industrious events rather than events in those that you're going to feel inferior to others. Okay, this is perhaps the stage that Erik Erikson is most known for, and because it introduces the concept of identity crisis. We've heard that term a lot in pop psychology and in contemporary, everyday life. But let's try to go more in detail about what this entails. Identity versus role confusion occurs in between, right at the onset of puberty up until 20. There is this discussion today that because Erikson observed adolescents and adults in the late 50s, early 60s, I'm pretty sure, things have changed a lot from then. Before, not everyone went to college. Instead, you would graduate high school and that was it. You would get married at around, 21 in the early 60s. You would have kids. One thing that has changed drastically, as even more than that, is people would usually just start a career at the same job, workplace, company, and that would be a lifetime career, a lifetime job. It was very rare and it wasn't encouraged for people to be hopping from one position to another. Instead, they would stay a lifetime in their jobs. That is what at least people would strive for. It's also it's a time of a lot of experimenting in many different ways. Scares me a little. I would prefer not to know, but yes, experimenting in many ways, and all the ways that you are imagining. We don't need to go much into detail or description, but is experimenting with many things. But, in this experimentation, this trying on different hats, should I hang out with this crowd? Let me give it a try. I actually never hang out with these people, but why if I do? In a way, I kind of like them. This group, I like this person, let's hang out, let's give it a try. There's a lot of that going on in these years. And, or should I try, I tried to be with this person romantically, a hookup, or whatever it is, or things happen spontaneously. Teenagers are very open to that because they are, again, experimenting. And the reason they are experimenting is because they are in search for this identity. Who am I? What type of person am I? And as self-evident as that question is, Trust me, many struggle with this. In fact, as I think I said at the beginning, that this stage is being extended into the mid-20s because of, again, as society as changing and people are no longer having this guaranteed success or lifetime career. People are changing their minds, college, gap years, you name it. So there are also many changes that do not have to be as profound, that are more superficial, and like the way teenagers dress, the amount of time they put in, fixing their hair. Am I going to look more, I don't know, preppy today? More, am I going to start wearing a jersey from now on? These things, admit it, you spend some time on it. And you might be thinking, well, that does not apply to me. Typical teenager response, and that might be the case. I'm not saying it doesn't, but compared to other people in other stages, you are, regardless of how much time, where you fall in that spectrum, you are spending much more time, trust me, in thinking about what is the appearance I'm going to portray to others. So, and the reason why there's so much time spent in this is because everything becomes a symbol of your expression. The expression of your identity of who you are. I don't know, like, and it's also a tough time. It's a time of a lot of confusion, because I don't remember this in a weird way. I do, but I think during your age, every activity, most of the activities you want to engage in seem like they're either too grown up, I'm not allowed, or I'm not supposed to be doing this, or I don't want to do this because I'm sort of over that. I'm already a teenager. I shouldn't be doing this childish things. I should be let out more often. Like, never, it's very rare that you engage in an activity and things go smoothly, because perhaps you're too young, you're not an adult, but you're not a child anymore. So, and that is reflected in that selection of engagements. Who am I is the question here. And the positive outcome is self-identity. You define who you are, what you like. You begin having a clear definition of what you want to do in the future. You may not know exactly what you're going to major in, but you know you're going to go into finance. You know you're going to go into teaching. You know that this is what you like, and you begin to have a clear sense of that. If you don't, then you're at risk of experiencing role confusion, not knowing who you are. And as trivial as that might sound, it's actually not. Remember, our self-concept is going to shape our relationships with others. If we don't know who we are, then it's very difficult to build self-esteem. I mean, self-esteem, we're going to like what if we don't know who we are? And so you get the idea, hopefully. Also, an important part of this stage is sexual identity. Who am I sexually? Who am I attracted to? And my sexual orientation is sort of defined and clear at this age, or during this stage. And there's a lot of questioning, a lot of reflection in this. And then resolving the conflict at this stage, sorry, I said conflict crisis, as Erikson would call it, involves sort of committing to this particular identity. And I know the word committing sounds like there's this effort put into it, like it's not natural, but if you have a clear sense of who you are, the commitment happens by itself, unless you are faking it, right? And this could be like the smallest thing. I know commitment sounds like a very strong word, but it could be, I don't know, committing to a career path. Like, you know that this is what you're going to do, and you're going to do everything you can to do it because you know that you like that. Having an idea of what field you would like to try, again, doesn't have to be very specific, but even that, or in fact, commitment to a personal style, like even that, as trivial as it might sound, is going to give you a sense of who you are, a better sense of who you are, more defined. So it's important to solve this crisis in order to have a well-defined identity, because otherwise then role confusion, or in fact, I was reading, I think your textbook said it, that you could end up with not only role confusion, not knowing who you are, what you like, and where you're going to, but also you can end up with a negative identity, and that's basically that. someone who thinks very low of themselves, and this is going to spill into self-esteem and how you view yourselves, and therefore how you view others. So again, I don't remember how I defined it, but role confusion is this inability. It's impossible for you to choose a role from life. And without roles, it leaves us without a commitment. And in fact, even a sense of this internalized sense of abandonment. And so, without knowing who you are, then it's very difficult to know what type of partners you are compatible with, who you are similar to. And so this is why, although I'm sure you're going to say, well, this doesn't apply to me. I get along with everybody. This is sort of the most common answer at this age. But trust me, once you go into your adulthood, you're going to look back and you're going to say, yeah, I formed part of a clique. Yeah, I know which group I would hang out the most. Because being part of a clique is not sort of a mutually exclusive thing to be friendly with other people. It becomes clearer to you where you belonged in high school. And because this idea that you got along with everybody, that everyone was made you feel as comfortable as you think you did, then there is role confusion there. And so you end this stage by answering to the question, who am I? And this gives you the virtue is fidelity. And again, this fidelity is a fidelity to a group you identify with. Am I this type of person? That's the fidelity to that group. Loyalty to who you are. It's not sort of fidelity as in relationship that much, meaning a romantic relationship. And so I already told you, I'm here reviewing my notes, I already told you about this when Erikson studied this. It was different at that time, so they're talking about extending. I'm going to write it here so you remember. Extending it to 25, this stage. And this extension, by the way, I have to apologize because now I revisited the emerging adulthood, and it was from another module. It was actually from this module, so I'm going to go back to top 10 and change that. If I don't, please remind me. But this extension of from 20 to 25, in fact, early 30s they're talking about, is talked about in that emerging adulthood portion of the chapter. All right. So. Okay, so now we reach the sixth stage of Erik Erikson's psychosocial theory of development, and it's intimacy versus isolation. This one is pretty straightforward, very important nonetheless, and the ages that correspond to this stage are from 20, 25, remember that extension I talked about in the previous one, to 40. It's actually, he was very clear in that 40 was a good stage for this one to end. What you're looking for in this stage is affiliation. Get familiar with that term, and sort of being close and intimate with others. Love is what we want to come out of this stage with. As you see, that's the virtue. And the crisis here is to know whether you are going to be able to commit with somebody else. In the individual, we begin to question, will I experience true love in my life, or will I be somebody who will not? And committing when I talk about committing to a relationship, fully so, as in a partner in love. Although, however, Erikson is clear too that meaningful friendships that are going to support you, long-lasting friendships, also can help you develop properly in this stage. If you can commit to one very deep friendship that it's not necessarily sexual or there's no physical attraction, then that can also be part of this crisis that we reach at this age. And according to Erikson, we could be experiencing this fear in losing ourselves in another, losing our self-identity, the one we achieved in the previous stage, if we commit to a relationship, sort of the sense of I'm not going to be free, I'm going to lose myself in this other person, I'm going to live just for that person and stop living my life. So overcoming this fear and risking this loss of self-identity that we think we might put at risk is, according to Erikson, necessary to achieve intimacy, because there is this trust that this person will respect and protect and support you, being whoever you are, if you are genuine. Erikson adds that having a strong identity That is, that it's backed up with confidence, that is the product again of a genuine exploration or search, is the only way we could really establish an intimate relationship with another person. Overcoming again this fear is the only way we can find that romantic partner and or a really true profound friendship. If the amount of intimacy we experience in this stage, this actually would be my stage, and is the amount of intimacy we experience during the psychosocial stage is, if it's greater than the amount of isolation, then Erikson states that we will emerge this state with the virtue of exactly that, love. So again, going back to that self-identity part, having a clear and confident definition of who you are is going to be the first step. It's what provides us with the strength to do what is required to be in a loving relationship. And what is required? Well, there's a lot of sacrifice, there's a lot of devotion, and there's a lot of giving, right? Without expecting anything back. And you need to know who you are before that is achieved or even attempted. It's necessary for loving relationships between adults. So again, will I be loved or will I end up alone? That's the question of intimacy versus isolation. We're almost there, guys. 7th stage is generativity versus stagnation. Man, these words. And this is also mid-aged. Wow, I didn't know it was that close. Anyway, okay, Ron, get back on track. In this stage, you begin to think about generativity, think about generation. Again, associate those two words. It's going to make sense in just a few seconds. Generativity, generations. Why? Because you start to think about future generations. Otherwise, according to Erikson, if you don't think about these future generations, then you will stagnate. And but first of all, what does he mean by future generations? It's sort of at this point in life, we begin to, and this is key here, I'm surprised I didn't write it there on the PowerPoint, but you begin to stop, you begin this very intense selfless feeling that it's not about you, that it's time to really give to others. And the importance is going to come from your family members, your children, perhaps even grandchildren towards the end of the stage. And you begin to really care more about the other than yourself, if you are towards this generativity, which is the positive outcome of this psychosocial stage. Because otherwise, according to Erikson, if this does not happen, then development will come to a halt here, and you will stagnate. You will be stuck. And what he meant truly, Erikson, by this is a sort of a failure to consider or have concern about others. You will not have this concern for how you have contributed to the well-being of others. What have you given to society? That's the question in this stage. How have I made other people happy? And it's a difficult stage because it's all about, again, making your mark in the world, as cheesy as that might sound, is because you start to think about legacy, passing on to a legacy. What am I going to leave in this world? What am I going to be reminded for? And this becomes really marked confused. It's intense. And if you cannot answer that question sincerely, and if you don't have any clue what you can do in order to answer that positively or sincerely, then you begin to think that you're going to stagnate. You're going to feel empty. This is a time when many adults in mid-age have had a successful career, and they go back to teaching. Teaching is a generative activity, and many people go back to teaching, or they begin to do volunteer work. And Erikson would say that it is precisely that. They're answering to that question. What they want to leave something. They want to leave a mark for future generations. Now, keep in mind that while it sounds incredibly romantic that I say future generations, you begin thinking about society, so did I. And this can be a little daunting, right? I mean, wait a minute, I haven't thought about that. I haven't thought about, to be quite frank, I don't know if I really am interested in being something important for society. No, it's not about being the next Martin Luther King Jr. or something like that. It's more, I mean, generativity or engaging in generative activity could be simply taking care of your children. Now I've spent my life trying, dedicated to my career, not spending much time with my children. Now I feel a little bit more financially stable, or simply I have more time and I'm going to support them in a way that I can. So that itself is generativity seeking, or generative activity. And then, so again, the connection here is, I wanted to leave you guys with this, is that Erikson added that in order that caring for others and forgetting about yourself a bit, it comes hand in hand with personal growth. And that's basically what development or positive outcome of development is personal growth. Otherwise, if you cannot come out with a generative activity that you want to engage in, you can't find out how you can leave a mark in this world, or you have no clue, then you are left very a sense like you're feeling less worthy, bored, stagnated, basically. Oh, I forgot to mention that the virtue in the stage is care. Again, you put in parentheses in your notes, care for others, not me. Guys, last one, 8th stage in Erik Erikson's psychosocial theory of development. This one is ego integrity versus despair. Ages are, oh, that's a mistake right there, guys. That's the previous one, 65 to death, to the end of our lives. And this is precisely what this stage is about. By the way, that picture is from the movie Jack Nicholson, one of my favorite actors, with Morgan Freeman, and this is the bucket list. I guess that doesn't require much explanation as to why I placed it on this stage, because it is a bucket list. You begin looking back at your life. You see, first of all, that death is near, and near I mean by 1 year, 10 years. But the key challenge or crisis, crisis of this stage is, according to Erikson, is that what will lead to a positive or negative outcome is to come to peace with your life. And you begin questioning, have I lived a good life despite the mistakes? Yes, I know I made mistakes. I know I could have done things differently. But have I forgiven myself? And have I come at least to a peace with my mistakes? And am I able to see the positive in them and the positive overall of my life? Yes, I could have spent more time with my children, but at this time, if you go through your life, you look back and you sincerely recognize your mistakes, your weaknesses, but also begin recognizing also your strengths that you perhaps haven't thought about much until this point in life. So as long as you come to peace with that, then you will end up with ego integrity, an integral life, meaning for Erikson, it means that satisfaction of living the best life you could, and accepting again those mistakes. And yes, so again, it's a lot of reflection. You begin to consider your own life cycle, and it's for important development. It's precisely that. And if you are not, then because it's a very challenging, I don't mean to trivialize it either, because it is very challenging. You're coming to the end of your life, and there are already very likely health and financial burdens that tend to happen at this point in life. And if you're not able to look back and to come to peace with your mistakes and your past, then according to Erikson, you enter in a state of despair, which is this, despair stemming from regret. I should have done things differently. And anyone who has experienced any type of regret knows that that's very heavy. And that, of course, is a negative outcome of this final stage of Erik Erikson's psychosocial theory of development. That's it, guys. Thank you.